My father was a traveling salesman and managing traveling salesman for a large shoe firm in Germany. I'm one of those who was very well protected by my parents, so that I was not exposed in a way that would cause me fright or cause me to be upset. But I do have a few events that I can recall. We lived in a neighborhood in Berlin that was very fashionable. We had a lovely apartment in a complex of apartment buildings that had just been built shortly before I was born. And I do remember that we had to vacate those apartments around I think it was 1936 or 1937, because they were being taken over, of course, by Nazi officials. I have a memory of 1936 when the Olympics were celebrated in Germany, particularly in Berlin. And the reason I have a memory of that is because of the enormous number of flags that flew everywhere. Both the Nazi emblem, but also the Olympic emblem. At the age of 6, I went to school. And by that time, public schools were already closed to Jews. As a child, I was very blonde and very typically German looking. My mother too, typical, very attractive German women. And we were somewhere in Berlin, and journalists wanted to take my picture as a representative, my mother and me as representative of German youth, when my father showed up. And then they said, "There's a yeet," and that was the end of that picture-taking session. My father had been immune from all of these things until my birthday in 1938, when on one of his trips to the north of Germany, which he had visited regularly to see his customers, he went after, as he always did, to a particular hotel. And that particular evening, there was no room for him. So he went to another one, I think, and then he did find a room. And so he settled into that hotel for the evening, and before going to bed, had dinner downstairs in the restaurant. And the next day, came again to the restaurant for breakfast and was approached by two policemen who asked him if he had been in the restaurant the night before. He said, "Yes, of course." And so they presented him with a newspaper. This is the story I have from him. And in the margin of the newspaper, next to an article that was reporting on a speech that Hitler had made the night before, he allegedly had written some remarks that were not favorable. He hadn't, actually, but that was the accusation, so he was arrested. And the news of his arrest came on the very day on my very birthday. My father, from jail, was then transferred to Buchenwald, and after some months, from Buchenwald to Dachau. And it was during that period that my mother went about trying to get us out of the country. She managed to get the necessary permits and the tickets. He came back to our apartment, you see. And then by that time, all the arrangements were made for us to travel, and everything was packed and so on and what have you. Then I do remember that my mother and I traveled by train from Berlin to Hamburg without my father, that he came separately later, and the ship sailed. The memory of the ship was that of a luxury liner, which it was in its day. And it sailed regularly between Hamburg and New York. And I think in the summer had cruises, just as now, in the Caribbean. You see, with Europeans or Americans in the Caribbean. So it was a very nice ship. Life on board, especially going out, was wonderful. And there were other youngsters on board. In the last 3, 4, 5 years, there has been a reunion of the passengers of the ship. And I attended one in Ottawa.